It is no surprise that 2024 was a bit of a roller coaster when it comes to real estate in Canada. Everything from rising interest rates to suddenly midway through the year, we saw rates come down. We saw massive amounts of immigration, and now there's talk that they're going to try to reduce it. We even saw some crazy policy changes, like the fact that you can buy a house now for up to $1.5 million and not have to put 20% down. There is a lot that happened this past year. And of course, that all leads us up into this episode of the podcast. What are my predictions for 2025? You're listening to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast with your host, Cameron Manning. We bring you the industry experts each episode who will help you man up on your real estate career. I get asked this a lot. What do you think is going to happen next year? So we're going to dive into some of my predictions for 2025 and what I think might come true in the market. Now, saying that, I'm going to put a little disclaimer on this video that says that this is not by any means financial advice. And in fact, this is me just making my best guess based on the data that we have today. You are meant to do your own due diligence at the time of making your purchase or selling decisions, and you should consult with a professional in your area to make sure that you are making the best decision for yourself. This is, of course, crystal ball territory. However, if you do live in the greater Vancouver market and would like to have a conversation about what your buying or selling needs are, we are happy to have that conversation. You can head over to the link in my bio and book a 15-minute consultation so we can chat about what you're planning to do in 2025 and how we can possibly help you to get there. Let's dive right into it, shall we? This is another episode of Manning Up After Dark on the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. And yes, it is time to do the 2025 predictions. What do I think is going to happen in the real estate market going forward in Canada? And specifically when I am talking a lot about the major cities because we do operate out of the greater Vancouver area. And I am going to break this segment up into 4 distinct sections here. First, we're going to talk about interest rates. This has been a major talking point as we have seen the rates come down from 5% to 3.25%. That is a whopping 1.75% in the last 6 months or so. So we're going to talk about what I think might happen with interest rates as we head into the new year. And we're going to talk about what some of the bank predictions are as well. The next part we're going to talk about in section 2 is, of course, immigration. We have seen a significant impact on immigration on Canadian real estate over the last several years. What is going to happen as we continue to move forward when it comes to immigration and the impact we're going to see? The next, of course, is what everyone wants to know. Section 3 is going to be on the prices. What is going to happen to prices in real estate? And again, I'm going to be talking more broadly in and around the greater Vancouver market. So make sure you look up your own market stats in the area in which you are living in, because there's no such thing as the Canadian real estate market. There is micro markets on micro markets on micro markets. And this is a generalization based on the first 2 categories. And finally, section 4, we're going to talk about some wild cards. What could possibly happen that could throw all these predictions that I'm making into absolute chaos, and who the hell knows what's going to happen. So let's dive in. So let's talk about part 1, interest rates. What's going to happen when it comes to interest rates here in Canada? To kind of preface this, we got to look back at during the pandemic, we saw interest rates absolutely drop. And you can see a video that I did recently where I actually showed the difference between inflation and the interest rates. You can check that video out right here. Now, when it comes to interest rates, what happens with interest rates has a lot to do with what's happening economically. Things like, how's the inflation rate? Where are we at with unemployment? Is there global things that we need to react to in order to make sure we stimulate? Is our GDP growing or is it shrinking? And of course, we have seen not so great economic stability over the last year. We have seen unemployment rise to 6.8%. We have seen inflation at an all-time high, but it has been coming down. And that's why Tiff Macklin has been bringing the interest rate down. We also have threats from the US of tariffs, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. All of this is going to make an impact on what's going to happen when it comes to interest rates. Now, at the beginning of the year, our interest rate, the overnight lending rate for the Bank of Canada was sitting at 5%. So that means that we are at an all-time high for recent years for the Bank of Canada rate. Banks then set their prime rate based on the Bank of Canada's overnight lending rate. And then, of course, they come up with their actual interest rates that they're going to lend out. We saw rates as high as 6.5, even 7% in some cases on a variable. Now, those have been coming down because over the last 6 months, we have seen some significant rate drops, bringing that rate down to 3.25%, meaning that the economy has not been strong. The Bank of Canada is looking at the fact that we are in a in my opinion, a recession. We've seen unemployment go up. We have seen our inflation drop actually to a point that's lower than when it's actually healthy. Bank of Canada sets a target to keep inflation in and around the 2%, and 1 month we saw it as low as 1.6%. Our GDP is actually down, and our growth of our economy is actually struggling a little bit, and we are seeing all of that start to play a factor. So with all that being said, I anticipate we're going to see some more rate drops throughout the year. Now, how much will it come down? That's a good question, and even some of the biggest economists for the major banks are mixed when it comes to a lot of these. I took a look at what some of the biggest banks are anticipating when it comes to where the rates are going to end for the beginning of the year. And here's what a lot of them are saying. And you can see that this is a mix. Scotiabank predicts that Bank of Canada is going to hold their rate at 3% till the end of 2026. If that's the case, that means we have one more small rate cut that's likely to happen, and then that's it. Then you have BMO that's a little bit more aggressive. BMO figures they're going to bring the rate down to 2.5 by mid 2025. That means we're looking at another 0.75 basis points cut before the middle of the year. That's a pretty significant drop when you consider that Scotiabank is saying only 0.25 over the year. Then you have CIBC that says they're anticipating it to go as far down as 2.25% by the end of the year. So that's another significant drop. That's another whole 1% drop. And then RBC, one of the most bullish that I found, they anticipate it to go down as low as 2%. So those are vastly different predictions. So with all that being said, with the banks kind of all over the map, what's my prediction? Well, my prediction is that we are indeed going to see, I would anticipate a very conservative 0.5% just across the board throughout the year. And if we see that the economy is still struggling, they're going to need to do some things to make sure they're stimulating the buying, stimulating the job growth, stimulating the economy. We could see as high as another full percentage point by the end of the year. Now, again, I am not an economist. I'm not even a mortgage broker. I'm a realtor. I'm just basing this off the fact that what we're seeing in the economy right now and what could possibly happen, they're going to need to react to, and they're going to react to it throughout the year. So I would say budget for a very conservative 0.5% throughout the year. And on the high end, possibly we'll be lucky and see a full 1% drop when it comes to the Bank of Canada rates. Now, again, what does this mean for you buying? Well, if you guys are looking to get into the market, this only impacts you if you're going on the variable rate. If you're going fixed rate, you have to look at what's happening in the bond yields, and that fluctuates on a regular basis. So make sure you have a conversation with a qualified mortgage professional to help you decide when you should be getting into the market and, of course, what kind of rates you can expect. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, if you just get into the market, regardless of what the rate's at, as long as you can afford the payments comfortably, you're going to do well in the long term. Okay, let's talk next about point number 2, which is immigration. Over the last several years, we have seen immigration kind of go crazy. We brought over 1 million new Canadians in over the last year and a bit here, which has really put a significant strain on a lot of systems, not just housing in Canada, everything from healthcare to jobs to everything. A significant reason why we have such unemployment growth is due to the fact that we brought so many people, and everyone needs jobs. I've talked about it before, but we have put some ads out for jobs and we get so many resumes in from people across the board looking for work right now. It's pretty dismal out there when you're trying to look through 300 candidates trying to find the best one for the position. All of this being said, the government of Canada has come out saying that they are going to adjust their immigration policies and bring less people in than they have in the past. In fact, their target for 2025 is to cap it at around 395,000 new people. Now, this doesn't include student visas. This is PRs, people moving and immigrating into the country. However, they have said that they're actually looking to limit the number of visas for students they're going to be offering as well, making sure that they put some checks and balances because they went a little crazy the last little while. Now, when you think about it, 395,000 new Canadians, though, is still a significant amount of people when we have a population of only about 41 million right now. And at the end of the day, when you have CMHC putting out reports saying that we are running at about only 200,000 or so housing starts per year, we're still going to be behind the overall growth that Canada is going to see. So when you factor in these two components, where yes, it's still a lower amount of immigration, but we're still not building enough homes, long term, the effect is going to be that we're going to put pressure on an already pressurized housing market. That long term, we're likely going to see prices start to rise again. Now, this leads me into the next segment, which is what's actually going to happen in 2025 on prices. And here's where we have to dive into a little bit of the supply versus demand conversation. Now, what generates demand? There's always something that creates more demand. One, interest rates is a major impact on demand. The lower the interest rate, the more people can afford, the more they're going to want to get into the market and take advantage of cheaper rates. If we continue to see that rate drop, that 0.5 or possibly 1%, we are going to see more people come into the market. Since the last 2.5 rate drops, we have already started to see an increase in sales starting to happen. These increases are not crazy dramatic. We're not talking that suddenly there was a huge wave of buyers. Just overall, we went from anywhere from 1,500 to 1,800 sales to about 2,500 sales. It's a decent jump. I anticipate that that jump is going to continue to grow. However, the next thing we got to look at though is the fact that we have had significant jumps when it comes to our inventory already. As the rates started to come down, we saw the listing inventory start to rise at a dramatic pace. In fact, we went from anywhere from 8,000 listings on the market in the greater Vancouver area to over 14,000 listings. And that's at a time when sales were still coming down. So while we are seeing sales start to increase, I anticipate it's going to take a while for that sale increase to actually absorb a lot of this new inventory that we have seen come onto the market. And in fact, we are heading into the spring market, which is a notorious market for increasing the level of inventory. Will we see more buyers come into the market? Absolutely. But we are going to see a flood of sellers coming onto the market. So if you are a seller and you want to be successful in getting your home sold, a couple of things that you need to think about. One, you cannot price your property for what people were getting a year to 2 years ago. You have to look at what's happening in the market right now and be realistic with the fact that you're competing with a lot of other sellers in the market. You're going to have to price your home accordingly. Two major things that buyers look at is price and condition. If the price is too high versus the condition that you're offering, you're not going to make a sale. And what ends up happening is your days on market go up and your price eventually does come down. We also have the fact that in many cases, a lot of people are coming up for renewals on their mortgages. In fact, when people were purchasing in 2020 and they're going on a 5-year fixed and they were getting interest rates at like 1.5 to 2%, suddenly their rates are going to over double in most cases. It won't be surprising that someone gets a fixed rate now at between 4 to 5%. And suddenly that's going to completely change their financial structure. We are going to see a lot of people likely have to put their homes up for sale. Also, not just for the fact that they're looking to get out of the market in the spring, but also due to the fact that they cannot afford the payments on their home anymore. And they're likely going to look to liquidate. Now, the good news is if you bought in 2020 or even beginning of 2021, you probably still do have a little bit of equity that you can play with and you can get out of it with some money in your pocket. You bought on the later end of 2021 into 2022, you bought at that height of the market, you might have to be prepared to walk away at a little bit of a lower price and maybe take a little bit of a loss. That's just the reality of the fact. So what does all this mean when it comes to prices? I anticipate for the first little while of the year, we are going to see prices probably just stay relatively flat. Some markets will see a little slight increase. Other ones will see slight declines. It depends on the product type and the number of inventory that comes on the market. For example, if you're trying to sell condos right now, especially if you bought a pre-sale and you're trying to sell it as an assignment, don't anticipate to make a significant amount of money. If you can sell your condo and recoup your deposit as an assignment after expenses, you're winning in the market right now. If you're thinking about trying to make money on your deposit, there's a high likelihood you're not going to do that. You're better off being prepared to close and hold on to that property for a couple of years to ride it through. If you're in some markets that have less inventory or less competition overall, like some detached markets, you might see the prices start to go up very slightly. Again, this is all crystal ball territory, and we're going to have to watch how the market plays out throughout the year. Be very specific. I think that we're going to see a fairly flat year, some declines, some increase, depending on the product type that you're looking to sell and the overall inventory that's in that market. And lastly, when we talk about part number 4 here, which is the wild cards, there are a couple things that I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to spend too much time in this segment because this is where we can get into like tons of different conspiracy theories. That's where we can kind of really go down the rabbit hole. But there's 2 things I want to talk about. One, US incoming President Trump is talking about a 25% tariff when it comes to Canadian exports. That is pretty freaking huge. So if that does happen, the Bank of Canada is going to have to react immediately, and the government of Canada, and we're likely to see them actually bring those rates further down, try to stimulate extra spending, stimulate extra growth in the economy, because that's going to put a lot of pressure on Canada's GDP and really just kind of create a big pressure cooker. So that could cause rates to come down. It could cause things to be a little tougher here in Canada for a while. But of course, if they bring rates down, well, that eventual impact will be that buyers might start getting stimulated and they might start going into the market. The other major thing is, when the fuck are we going to have an election? There's been a lot of talk right now. Obviously, we are heading into an election sometime this year. The real impact is going to be when. Are we going to wait till October when it is actually scheduled? Or will we suddenly see Jagmeet Singh vote no confidence? You know, he probably hits his pension at some point and says, you know what? Now's the time to oust the government. Trudeau is out. Let's call an election. Maybe we'll do an election in February or March. We don't really know, but this will have an impact on real estate in Canada, on the market in general, because depending when that election happens and we get a new government in place, they're going to start to make policy changes, and those policy changes will have an effect anywhere from 3 to 6 months down the line. So if we are waiting till October to have an election, we're going to see changes in 2026. If we have an election at the beginning of the new year in 2025, we will see by the end of 2025 radical changes in our real estate kind of economy. Because again, different governments are going to bring in different policies that they think are going to help with the real estate market. And some of these policies could help, and other ones could put more pressure on the system that we already have. So it's really to be seen what happens with these two major wild cards throughout 2025. So that's it. That is my predictions for 2025. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's up to you to do your own due diligence and make sure you're making the right choice for your family, for yourself, for your finances when you're thinking about buying, selling, or investing. If you're in and around the Greater Vancouver market, of course, our team is happy to have a consultation with you, have a chat and see where you're at and what is the best move for you when it comes to buying, selling, or investing. And of course, everything that I said here is just a prediction. It is just a crystal ball reading. You, again, do your own due diligence. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you haven't already subscribed, go down, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys don't miss another episode. If you're listening to the podcast, of course, subscribe on Spotify or on Apple. Give me a rating on those platforms as well. That really helps out the Spotify algorithms to show this to more places. And of course, like this video, comment below, what are some of your predictions for 2025? And with that being said, this is our last podcast of 2024. Happy New Year, everyone. We'll see you in 2025. Take care.